I'd like to welcome everyone to council meeting tonight. Council Sherman, would you lead us in prayer and pledge of allegiance?
Yep. Lord, we come to you humbly tonight. We thank you for life and liberty and the chance to lead our city in the correct direction during this pandemic. We pray that you will give us wisdom. We pray for those on the front lines, in our hospitals and in our healthcare system that are trying to combat this virus. Lord, be with us tonight again. We thank you for our military. We thank you for our state and our federal leadership and those around the world that are making tough decisions. Amen. Attention, salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Seats. Roll call, please. Here. 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 Here.
Here.
Down here. Item 2, discussion and possible action regarding extension of an ordinance of the City of Pryor Creek, Oklahoma pursuant to the emergency provisions of the Charter of the City of Pryor Creek, Oklahoma, and an applicable state law relating to the COVID-19 virus pandemic required to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Pryor Creek, Oklahoma. Said ordinance called for immediate implementation of temporary restriction and limitation of provision of services and operations of restaurants, food courts, cafes, coffee houses, other places of public trade, gathering, and accommodation service and gatherings. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second. Motion, Shropshire. Second, Smith. Discussion.
I'd like to know, have we given out any warnings or citations regarding this ordinance as of yet?
Not at this point. I think everybody's trying to be as safe as they can. We haven't had any problems. As far as from the police point of view, I'm going to ask that we do extend this. I think it's good from our perspective, just like you would have a city ticket and a but also saying that, whatever way the district court, the state executive order is going to be some more restrictions. So I think we're about the same either way, but if we did let the ordinance go, I think we would have to enforce, the state ordinance either way. So it's kind of a 50-50, but we are going to ask that you guys do extend this on our behalf.
Thanks. Have we had any calls in to City Hall at all on maybe people disobeying or not following the ordinance per se? Have we heard any of that or had any phone calls?
I have a kind of a cryptic message today that said, well, it just said, people are acting like this is a vacation. And then it said, to go to here, to look here. And there was no attachment or anything, so I don't know what they were talking about.
Okay.
I've taken several calls over the last week, all the way from can businesses open, what are we supposed to do, and those kinds of calls from several different businesses.
And if we're talking about questions, oh yeah, we get a lot of questions. I think the first 3 or 4 days, maybe the first week, dispatch was, the phone wouldn't stop ringing with people trying to figure out what they're supposed to do to try to abide by the law.
Okay.
So questions in general, yeah, we're getting a bunch of those.
We were out last night, or I was out last night. We've been trying to get takeout meals and stuff, trying to keep people, working and going as much as we can. And it was about 5:45 to 6 o'clock. Main Street, we went to Boomerang, and Main Street was just ghost town. I mean, there was nothing downtown at that time. It was pretty empty. Haven't seen it that way in a long time. So I think people are trying to abide by the rules, and I do know that there's a lot of people that are trying to help out the different restaurants and stuff. Saturday we were driving around. We thought we'd go to JL's, except the line wrapped around out into the highway, so we decided we'd probably pass that one up that night. But La Fuente's was the same way. So some of our restaurants are getting business that's good. Where people are trying to do the best they can and help them.
So I had one of my one of our couriers that brings packages, came by my store today, and one of the comments he made though, and this will lead into a question I've got. He said, "What's going on in Pryor? This place is buzzing like a beehive, and every other town I go to is dead." Okay, so part of my responsibilities require me to go out through the day and leave the store, go to the bank, go here, do those things for functionability. And I noticed that we are significantly busier than other communities. So my question is, are we doing our part compared to those around us? I see that our cases are climbing. My concern is I don't know that we're really doing enough compared to those cities around us.
What parts are busy?
Downtown was busy. I don't know that we have food trucks out now. I don't know that that's...
So my question would be, our ordinance compared to what we have on our website listing what is essential infrastructure is, those 14 areas, is that what we are enforcing? That unless you are essential within those 14 areas of essential critical infrastructure, or are we following just what we have in our ordinance?
I've encouraged that. Speak to all of that. Let me speak to that, and if you could follow up. What I've encouraged all of our businesses to do is to understand what those critical infrastructure sectors are. And so I get a call from a lawn mowing company, okay? And so I ask myself, does that come under the category of public health to maintain the lawn so that vermin don't grow in the lawn? So I think probably so. So that's the way I've answered that. I got a call from dry cleaners, and the dry cleaners said, how do I fall under that category? I said, well, that is an item that probably can be considered to be public health as well. If it's dry cleaners, it's also a laundromat would be under that same category. So I've gotten those kinds of calls from citizens trying to understand how they fit into the categories. So
the dry cleaners actually fit into the governor's. He said that they were able to stay open, cleaners and stuff. So that was actually covered by name in there.
But the confusion is, does our ordinance line up with the state directive? I understand we have to have our ordinance so that our law enforcement can take effect if someone is breaking one of our ordinance pieces. But there's confusion in what our ordinance states and what the state mandate states.
So I'd like
can we enforce those essential critical infrastructure pieces?
Yeah, I'd like for Mr. Ritchie to speak to that, if you would, please.
First of all, and I know that all of you guys appreciate this, we are in a time when there is no way to eliminate all confusion.
Right.
There's no possible way for it to be done because we have federal emergency provisions that are kicked in. We have state emergency provisions which are kicked in. Then we have local jurisdictions. I mean, we live in this wonderful free country where we have a fantastic system, and this is just part of that system. And so we have multiple cities largely doing the same thing, but with variations. So no way to eliminate the confusion. But let me go through some stuff here because I don't think it's quite as confusing as maybe people think it is. If you look at the ordinance that we passed, I got a lot of papers here, so forgive me, I'm going to have to go through some of them. Okay, so if you look at the ordinance that we passed, and I'm just going to go through the paragraphs after where it says Section 1 ordinance to read as follows, okay? Section A is completely consistent with what the governor has indicated. Then we go to Section B. Section B1 is completely consistent with what the governor has indicated. Section B2, completely consistent with what the governor has indicated. Section 3, A and B are where we have a difference. So let me come back to those. Section 4 is completely consistent. So Section 5 is also consistent. C, D, and E, all of those sections are consistent. So the only place that the City of Pryor's ordinance varies from the governor's executive order is under 3A and B. Now, the law is that cities may enact ordinances which are less restrictive than state law, but we may not implement an ordinance that is more restrictive than state law. Items 3A and 3B are less restrictive than what the governor has issued in the executive order. Not more restrictive, but less restrictive. In A and B of paragraph 3, we're talking about gymnasiums, studios, hair salons, nail salons, and spas. So when we look at, and I'm sorry, hopefully I can present this and not be confusing about it. So the executive order implemented the Homeland Security measures, which the Homeland Security measures are where the critical sectors are defined. The legislation of the Homeland Security indicates that these are the critical sectors as our economy has been divided into. However, it has a disclaimer or a wiggle room clause in it that says these are not the exclusive critical sectors. It says these are the ones that we've identified, but these are not exclusive. And we leave to the jurisdiction of the state and the municipalities or the cities, the local jurisdictions, to make further definition of critical sectors to their economy. So there's action, and then when the governor enacted his executive order, he indicated the critical sectors are the sectors identified by the Homeland Security legislation. So that carried with it the ability of the state and local governments to further define those critical sectors in their economy. So you've probably seen, and I don't know what you were referring to on the website, but the definition of the critical sectors, I would assume that was, I haven't looked at that, but I assume that what that is the governor's amended executive memorandum.
It's under news on the website,
Okay.
Critical Infrastructure, March 24th.
When was it? 24th?
I believe so.
Okay, so that's what it is.
Okay.
It may just be a summary of it, because that's what we typically see released, are summaries of those executive orders. But the governor's executive order was clarified on the 24th, filed on the 25th in a memorandum from the governor, that he was exercising his ability at the state level to further define critical sectors in our economy that the Homeland Security allows him to do.
And that's what it is.
And I know a lot of people, if I refer to it in this way, maybe most people will recognize it. They said this basically undoes everything that we just did. Because the critical sector definition in here is super expansive. Midstream, people involved in midstream commerce in any industry. I highlighted one example here. It's on page, I know you probably don't have this order, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's on the 5th page of the order. Underneath, this is not in your packet, guys. This is stuff I brought with me. But one of the critical sectors that the governor identified, he identified it as a title of other community-based government operations and essential functions. And then underneath it, it's got a bunch of different bullet points. One of the bullet points is this. It says commercial retail stores, comma, that supply essential sectors, comma, including convenience stores, general merchandise stores, liquor, pet supply stores, auto supplies, and repair, hardware, home improvement, and home appliance retailers. Well, when I look at that, and I see general merchandise stores, what doesn't fall under that? So the governor is really, he's doing a great job. I'm not criticizing what he's doing, but that leaves it to local jurisdictions to further define this stuff. And really that fits with our form of government, right? Leaving it to the local people to determine their self-interest of what needs to be done in their community. So it fits the structure. The other thing that I would call your attention to is that in his order, and there's discussion about this all over the board in the legal community, that in the 4th amended executive order that the governor issued, that paragraph 20 where he talks about closure of businesses, and this is the one that I got like midway through the meeting last time. Somebody emailed it to me. It says, effective at 11:59 p.m., March 25, all businesses not identified as being within a critical infrastructure sector as defined by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and located in a county experiencing community spread of COVID-19 as identified by OSDH on its website shall close, period. Additional sectors may be designated as critical by the executive order or memorandum. Nothing in this provision shall prevent restaurants and bars from providing pickup, curbside, and delivery, and this will be effective April the 16th, 2020. So that came out, and then that definition memorandum that I referred to previously came out. But when he used the term, these businesses shall close, we got a question about that. What's that mean? Does that mean close to the public? Or does that mean cease all business operations? Closing to the public is one thing. And what we're trying to do is curb public being together, right? So closing to the public can mean locking your door while still operating your business interior. Doing whatever needs to be done to kind of operate. So what we have done with our ordinance would be less restrictive than closing. So it's legitimate, it's legal in its degree to which it impacts businesses, less restrictive than state law. And it's very specific on nail salons, hair salons, gymnasiums, in what conduct will be allowed that is consistent with CDC guidelines that have been put out for interactions with people. Does that help at all with your question?
It helps.
Okay?
I have some further thoughts.
One of the things that I have told each person that I have talked to who have called in, I've ended that conversation with an encouragement toward personal responsibility, which says we don't know if we're a carrier of the disease. We don't know if we are. How willing, I've asked him the question, how willing are you to potentially expose somebody else or expose yourself just by virtue of doing somebody's hair? So I've asked him, I've encouraged him to ask himself that question. And I asked myself that question as well. I don't want to be responsible for passing along something to anybody. And I would appreciate it if they wouldn't pass it along to me. So each one of those conversations I've tried to encourage personal responsibility, and I would encourage council and encourage those who are listening and those who are viewing tonight to ask yourself that question, because each one of us have personal responsibility for our neighbor. Responsibility.
Another question I'd like to, it's on the same subject, but the stimulus act that was passed, it said that if you have a small business and you keep the same amount of people employed and paid during this, that when the number that you had, I think the 15th of February was when it started, that you could apply for a small business loan, and that would help to pay for the employees that you had if you kept the same amount of employees. And quite possibly after that, that small business loan would turn into basically a grant. Is that not true?
Yeah, I haven't in detail dissected all of that, but I've looked at it pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
So I have that component that you're talking about right here.
Okay.
It says SBA loans under the CARES Act have the potential to be forgiven. So know your historical employment numbers during the dates between February 15, 2019 and June 30, 2019, as well as between January 1, 2020 and February 29, 2020. It says a percentage of the loan amount up to 100% has the potential to be forgiven based on the average monthly number of employees maintained during the COVID-19 crisis, February 15, 2020 through June, June 30th, 2020. So that's an estimate. So divided by the average monthly number of full-time equivalent employees prior to the crisis.
So
That's the formula.
anybody under 500 employed individuals is considered to be a small business, right?
That's correct.
With certain. So back to your question about closing. If the employees were inside, not letting the public inside perform whatever duties they needed to perform, it might be easier for an employer to keep those people occupied and keep them paid during that period of time, so they could apply for this loan and quite possibly at least keep an income coming. I'll put it that way. That's kind of what I was wondering about in that frame. If the doors are closed, people are inside cleaning, doing whatever they need to do, they keep the employee number up, then maybe there won't be so many people that will be unemployed during that period of time. I'll let you guys talk about that one too.
Hope so. Yeah, that's what we all hope, is that people can keep their jobs somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
I wasn't at the last meeting. I did watch it because I have a daughter that is compromised and has asthma, so I'm being very careful. And I wanted to add a few thoughts, and I put them down on paper, so I'm going to read it to you, just some thoughts on last meeting and what's going on in town and maybe what our responsibility is. The virus doesn't know where city limits starts And therefore, all municipalities and counties must be working in the same direction from a top-down model like we are, and I appreciate that. We have the advantage of learning from cities and towns that have or are experiencing a large number of positive cases and deaths. And the faster that we flatten the curve, the quicker we can start recovery, repair our economy, and get people who have lost their jobs back to work. Physical distancing is the only tool that we have right now to fight the virus. Local governments, me and you, we as a whole have to make decisions that are going to make us feel uncomfortable. Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Edmond, Norman, Stillwater, and Muskogee have all put into place shelter-in-place orders, and I feel that we need to do the same here in Pryor, Oklahoma. The ordinance that we're going to hopefully pass tonight for an extended period of time is just an initial step, and I feel that we must do more. The idea that we are attacking commerce is not a valid argument in these unprecedented times. It is time to recognize that we have no way to make a livelihood if we are not alive. I know that Mayor Lees and City Attorney Kim Ritchie, along with the police chief and assistant chief, are trying to make the best decisions while maintaining some type of normalcy. But nothing is normal about this virus, and it threatens our healthcare system, which in turn threatens our friends and our family that work in the healthcare system. Every person you come in contact with creates a potential spread of the virus, a spread of illness, and a spread of death. This virus is non-discriminatory. It kills anyone and everyone who cannot make the antibodies. I ask this council to take a stricter approach to contain the spread of COVID-19 with a shelter-in-place proclamation.
How's that going to affect pharmacies and grocery stores?
So this
All
is,
those employees to stay home?
so this is what Oklahoma City has put together. Meaning shelter-in-place proclamation means citizens may leave their residence for only essential activities, including to engage in activities or perform tasks essential to their health and safety or to the health and safety of their family, their household members, or pets, to obtain necessary services or supplies for themselves, family, household members, or pets, to deliver those services or supplies to other household consumer products and products necessary to maintain the safety, sanitation, and essential operations of residences, to engage in outdoor activity provided the individuals, except household family members, follow social distancing guidelines issued by the CDC, to perform work in an essential business, so if you're in an essential business, to care for or transport a family member or pet in another household, to move to another residence, either in or outside the city limits, or otherwise carry out activities specifically permitted that we could decide for ourselves as a city. But again, we have cities, thus far there are other cities that are meeting tonight to take this into consideration. Right now, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Edmond, Norman, Stillwater, and Muskogee have all taken this action to put a shelter-in-place proclamation together.
Council Sherman, I see that as the next step for us.
Thank you.
And as a mother of someone who is more at risk, I know where that comes from. So I appreciate that very much.
How quickly could we move on something like that?
We can move next week. We can move next week on that. I'm not sure that's not so I need to ask our city attorney. That's not on our agenda tonight, and so would it be appropriate for us to consider that tonight since it's not on this agenda?
No, it's not. Since it's not an agenda item tonight, we can't do it. However, it can be done in of course, a regular meeting, which will get coming up, but it can also be done in a special meeting, which we'd have to give our special meeting notice. But under these circumstances, it can be done in an emergency meeting. And as I visited with you briefly, emergency meetings don't have to have notice. So if that is something that you deem needs to be enacted under an emergency situation in the city of Pryor, you can literally decide that any day from here on out, and you can do an emergency meeting because you can do those without notice to do that limited emergency activity.
So, we would be able to adjourn this meeting and have an emergency meeting right after this meeting if we wanted to.
You could, and you would just have to make a judgment call on whether you felt like the situation had raised itself to that point where that was necessary action to be taken.
So, Ms. Sherman, Council Sherman, you read what Oklahoma City had established, is that correct?
That was just a portion. It went on to say that they were closing down their parks as well, and then some other pieces. So that would be the only thing we might want to give time to put together.
I think
what
that would be
pieces
wise.
we want to put in a proclamation, or I don't even know if it would be proclamation or if it would be ordinance worthy.
It would have to, in my opinion, it would need to be an ordinance by this city under our form of government with the ordinances and that we have to deal with. That's something that will, obviously, is on my radar to take up later, is restructuring our ordinances so that we can do some additional things like this that actually are effective. I have real doubts about the effectiveness of us doing a proclamation under our ordinances and our charter right now.
All right. So, I hate to use this terminology, take that under advisement, but with the intention of putting that together as soon as possible, I think that would benefit our community. At least that's the way I think about it.
I'm in agreement with putting a shelter-in-place proclamation in or ordinance in. These numbers are growing, and unless we do something to try and stop it, it's not gonna stop.
What about enforcement of something like that?
If we've got, enforcement's always a big concern, and if we do it in the manner we're talking about, where we do a local emergency ordinance under an emergency meeting, if that be the case, well, then it'll go into effect immediately after passage, and we'll be able to have our local enforcement in our local city court be able to deal with our own citizens right here in city court if necessary. And then, when necessary, we can always take something to district if we had to do something like that. How many cases are in Pryor and Mays County? Do we know?
Or,
Four, right?
Mays County, right?
yes,
I think that's 4 as of today, reported.
which means since our last meeting, it's doubled. My thoughts are, I think we need to, as leadership, we need to stress the severity of how rapid this is spreading. We can talk about flus and we can talk about all those other illnesses. The difference is that the flus and the colds and whatever's, we have vaccines for those, we have treatments for those, we understand those.
There's immunity to
There's
them.
immunity developed to those. What we don't have on this is we don't have immunity. We don't even really fully understand the mutation process of this COVID-19. What concerns me is, we all have to go out for necessities. That there's a time that'll take place. I have family members that live in Pasco, Washington, and they are under a stay-at-home order. And they are told you can leave once a week to go to the grocery store. Other than that, doctor visits, things like that, life, things like going to the pharmacy, that's okay. But it is stay at home. And they have, many of those communities in the state of Washington, as well as the state of Washington itself, have specifically deemed, we have to decide if we're in it to protect the economy side of it or if we're in it to protect the people. And I think the status of where this is, we need to protect the people. Our economy will come back, things will grow, we can regain, we can bounce back, but we can't get people back once we put them in the ground. And I think if we're allowing the vagueness of some of these ordinances to say, well, doesn't really define it,
we need to decide is, and I hate to pick on food trucks, we want food trucks coming in from other communities into ours, where they've served people at their truck in another community and they come in. Do we want businesses that are truly non-essential? I'm talking, antiques and things like that. We can live without those for a little while. Can you live without your medication? No. Can you live without your food? No. Can you live without, some of those communities in those areas in Washington where they're one of the epicenters of this, they've taken a pretty hard stance. I have a sister that lives in North Salt Lake, again, another community that's hit pretty hard. And they actually went door to door. You've got over 1 million people there. They went door to door on every apartment and put a sign that said, it's just a little sticky that said, here's the rules. We've enacted a curfew. We're going to do this. And if you don't, then it's a fine punishable of up to $1,000, not to exceed 1,000, and not to exceed 60 days in jail. They're serious. And if you look at the numbers in those towns, they're flattening the curve. They're not playing around with, well, it's pretty vague, so we're going to go ahead and let somebody stick toilet paper in their window and call themselves essential. It doesn't work that way. Close your door, go home, stay home. Those of us that have to be out and have to stay open to provide those essential services, it is mentally exhausting trying to take care of keeping facilities clean, keeping things in order, keeping everybody safe. We need to ease the burden for those. Some of us have family members that work in those facilities. Wouldn't it be nice to know that we're going to, as a city, say, we're going to lessen the amount of people that go in there and interact with our children and our wives and our family members? I agree with Council Sherman up here. I think we need to be very specific on this, and I don't think that it's a thing that we need to wait a week to meet on. I don't think it's a thing we need to put aside. I think this is, we come up with something to protect our people. They're first and foremost. And as leadership, we don't put our heads on our pillow till we got our people safe. That's my stance. That's where I'd like to see it. My wife said, can you keep it short tonight? And I said, well, we'll see where it goes. The whole idea is we have people to protect, and it's our responsibility. That's on our shoulders.
Do you need any more direction from the rest of the council if we're going to try to make this a quick turnaround, or
So the question, the motion on the floor right now is to extend this ordinance, okay? And so item H on this ordinance is where we decide how we're going to extend this ordinance, how far out we're going to extend this ordinance. So this ordinance is what is on the floor and has a motion, has a second, we've had discussion.
So can we extend this ordinance for an hour and have a meeting at that hour?
Procedurally, and that's what I was going to address, procedurally, kind of what are your options, where do you go from here? The only thing on the agenda is the extension of this ordinance to a date certain. So conceivably, you could extend it for a week, but you don't have to wait a week. Tomorrow, and you don't call the meeting in this meeting because that's not an agenda item. But after you adjourn this meeting, then the mayor can coordinate and do whatever needs to be done to either do an emergency meeting or a special meeting when it's deemed appropriate. And when I know when that is, then I know whether I need to stay up tonight and work or whether, which is fine, we can do it. But I do have these other ordinances that are proclamations, which I can simply turn into an ordinance. So it's not like we're starting from scratch. So it'd be a quick turnaround.
Would it be connected, would it be a continuation of the ordinance that we already have, or would it be it's brand new? Okay.
If we did something like what, a stay-at-home, it would be a new one, we'd rescind this one, and that would go into effect.
So the new ordinance would have to have some components of this ordinance that we have right now.
Yes,
But it would rescind this ordinance and it would be a new ordinance.
it would, yes.
Other discussion, I guess what we should do is we should
If we don't pass this one tonight, though, then
It needs to be passed.
we're without an ordinance until we have enough, so this one needs to go
Yeah, so
through.
this needs to be passed, but then at the time of the emergency, hearing, or
We'll discuss.
we can look at the other one.
Yeah, okay.
Since we do have a regularly scheduled council meeting in a week, then I would like to present that we extend this ordinance that we presently have a week. And if we had not done anything before then we would consider this again at that time. That would be April the 7th.
Yes, but I would still like to urge this council that we do something before April 7th.
I think we need to do something immediately. I know it's not on the agenda, but I think that's where we discuss, with what Kim Ritchie's told us, we need to figure something out now. If we can double our cases in our locale in a week, that could quadruple in another couple days. I think,
Can we have a guarantee, or can we just, that will be up to you, you'll let us know?
It's not an agenda item
Next
in this
agenda item?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
not an agenda
After you
in this meeting.
close, we can take it,
And then we
take
can
it up
discuss
and-
that? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So this will be extended to April 7th.
I'd like to recommend that it be extended to April the 7th.
Would the person who made the motion to approve that amend your motion to the April 7th date?
Yes, I will. I'll amend it to be approved through April 7th.
And I'll second that.
There's a motion to amend and a motion to second. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, call for vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Item 3 on the agenda is adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion Doyle, second Ketcher. Call for vote.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
We are adjourned. Question for